Mike Tomlinlee, but we might get into all that later. But we are here. It is Tuesday here in the Fox 7 newsroom. We got quite the slate lined up for you guys. As always, we're going to be kind of going back to the Uvalde trials. That's going to be a big thing that we're covering tonight. We're going to be having our very own Jenna King in here. She's been following along with these trials since they started. We had a lot of emotional testimonies today on the stand, giving a lot of insight on what unfolded there back in May of 2022. Then we also had a few processions for fallen law enforcement today. I know last night we talked about Aaron Armstrong. He was the off-duty Caldwell County Constable deputy who was killed here in North Austin. His memorial service and procession to the funeral, or to the graveyard over there, was today. Then we also had another procession for a Copperas Cove police officer who was killed just a little while ago as well. So we'll have that coverage and sound from those as well. We'll also be looking at some new hemp legislation here in Texas. It's going to be taking place that could be pretty dangerous to business owners here. A lot of them saying they might not be able to afford some of these changes. So we got all that and more to get into. Like I said, going to be starting off with these Uvalde trials. We had, some teachers take to the stand today, as well as, some family members as well, or some people who are directly involved with this as well. We'll go ahead and kind of, get right into this. We do have a lot of interviews to show you now. This is Joe Cuevas right here. Joe Vasquez, was an off-duty deputy at the time of the shooting. Vasquez was not with the Uvalde County Sheriff's Department over there. He was not involved in the local police department. He was a Zavala County Sheriff's deputy over there. His daughter was actually there at Robb Elementary at the time of the shooting back there in May. As you may remember, they had, over 300 officers respond to the scene over there. It took them, over an hour to get into that building today. Joe Vasquez on the stand today, he recounts his experience. He, found out about this shooting, and with his daughter being there, he decided to take it into his own hands. He drove over to the school, grabbed his vest, grabbed the rifle, and went in there. And he describes his experience. He ran past some of the officers who were standing outside, and he got in line with one of the teams that took down the shooter. Go ahead and take a listen to how he recounts that experience.
After they unlocked the door, I think they got both classroom doors open. We make entry. It's dark, can't see anything. As soon as I make entry, I realized I don't have a flashlight, I can't even see. So I look to my right, and there's a pile of the bodies. We didn't get shot.
Excuse me?
I was expecting to get shot.
You didn't know where the shooter was?
No, I thought he was going to be to the right as soon as we made entry.
You thought he was going to be where the bodies were?
Yes.
So that's where you focused your picture?
Yes, but it was hard to see. It was dark. And then the door, you hear a door creak open in front, and then the shooting starts.
When you say a door creak open in front, what do you mean? Where was that door?
It was directly in front of us. Whoever was in front of me, whether it was a guy with a shield or a board tack, I don't know if he was in the stacks a little. I was either 2 or 3, so I don't know if someone peeled right. But whoever was in front of me, the door was right in front of him. So the guy with the shield, more than likely.
Was it across the road?
It was straight in front of the door.
In front of the entrance door, there was another door across the road?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So tell us what you heard and what you saw.
So the shots ring out
From where?
directly in front. I could hear the shots coming. I'm carrying my rifle left-handed, so I can't even pick it up because we're so close together. Eventually, I transition to the right, fire a couple rounds, and it jams. Something happens with it. I'm still not sure. It felt like a long time. I know the video's fast, but it felt like a long time. Eventually, shooting happens behind me, and then it's over. And in front of me, there's someone with long hair face down, and I think I thought it was a teacher at first because he had long hair. They flip him over, and I could tell it's the shooter. He's in all black.
And, Joe Vasquez, describing the harrowing moments. I mean, this is the moments they are lining up outside of the classroom, this law enforcement, where the shooter is known to be. He says, they get into that door and he looks around and he sees these bodies of these children, in this classroom. And he said, going in there that he expected to die. And, just truly heartbreaking to kind of hear that. And he said, he went in there, expecting to be met with gunfire. You can hear him talking about how even his, gun jammed at a certain point as well. And, he was used beyond just describing his experience there on that day. He was also used with his background, in law enforcement and being as a Zavala County Sheriff's deputy. When he was being cross-examined, a lot of them were asking him, what would they do in Adrian Gonzalez's shoes? That was the school district officer who's now being charged with all of these child endangerment charges for being accused of failing to act and potentially save the lives of these children. So he's being cross-examined for, a large portion of this day, with them asking them how he would have treated it, what angle he would have taken. I mean, just getting, asked these questions, one after another. And then they eventually get to this point of them talking about going into the classroom and what's known as a fatal funnel. Go ahead and he'll describe to you what that is, and this will just play a big role in this trial coming up in a few minutes.
Easy to, like right now, you can point where you came in through without even looking. That's the advantage this person has. They know where you're coming in, you don't know where they're at.
And you're funneled in, and so it's a narrowing of an area that subjects the person coming through the fatal funnel to high vulnerability.
Yes.
And that's what you said, you're going to die in a fatal funnel.
Yes.
And so officers are taught to, at almost at all costs, to avoid a fatal funnel.
Yes.
Tactically. So an inward swinging door, you said you can either get a ramming device or you can kick open a door and then you can breach it. Correct?
Yes.
And then actually the inward swinging door tactically is to your advantage, because if there's someone back here, it's used as distraction or some type of distortion, so you can tactically.
Yes.
React. But an outward swinging door is different.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that is?
And, him describing that fatal funnel, describing the danger that those officers had going into that doorway with the shooter in there, probably very aware that these officers were trying to get in. And, to be exact, it says, a fatal funnel, a narrow choke point like a doorway or hallway where individuals become extremely vulnerable to attack. So that was, one of the later questions that was asked him. And then once Joe Vasquez had actually finished wrapping up his questions and the judge here was kind of talking to him, we see a very interesting and a very passionate outburst from one of the family members here in the trial room, who, yells out after he is taken to the stand, and you'll kind of see this scene play out. We'll go ahead and play it for you in its entirety.
Yes, sir. Just try to avoid talking about the case until you know the case is over with. Yes, sir. Today. Thank you very much.
You know who went into the fatal funnel? My sister went into the fatal funnel.
Ma'am,
Did she need a key? Why do you need a key?
ma'am, go ahead and have a seat.
No, see that she didn't lock her door. She went into the fatal funnel. She did it! Not you, bastard!
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to disregard the outburst. I forewarn these folks, if they do that, there's not going to be any warnings. They're going to be removed for the rest of the trial.
And you can see just, emotions coming to a boil there. It was confirmed that woman that was a part of that outburst right there, she was a sister of one of the teachers that was killed in those attacks on Robb Elementary. And just, we kind of decipher what she says. And he says, who went into the fatal funnel? My sister went into the fatal funnel. Did she need a key? Y'all are saying she didn't lock her door. She went to the fatal funnel. She did it. So, Joe Vasquez talking about these officers going into the fatal funnel and putting their lives on the line. Well, this woman in the courtroom with that outburst saying, who else did it? My sister did. My sister, put her life on the line in order to potentially save some of these kids. So a very, emotional outburst, from this woman in the courtroom. You can see the judge was very quick to dismiss it, and he even, once they returned back, he said, hey, if we have these outbursts again, he did threaten a mistrial. This is kind of a warning, to those who might consider something like that in the future, saying that if you are feeling this passionate about it, you have to think if you act that way in the courtroom while these proceedings are going, that you do risk a mistrial. But, beside that was one of the highlights of the day, maybe one of the, more kind of, interesting parts to see, but we did see some teachers take to the stand as well. This is one of them. This was Erin Robin. She is a second grade teacher. She go ahead and describes the moments when these shots started firing off.
And I kept looking at the windows, and that was kind of the direction of the gunfire, or the sounds we could hear. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to die today. I felt like a sitting duck, just waiting to die. Sorry.
Did you rearrange the furniture to make like a cover for the children?
Yes. So we have these little square wooden desks, and I started flipping them over, and I put them over their side, and I made like a wall, and I stacked a desk on top of the other, so I had 4, and I kind of crouched behind those, and I could see the door between the 2 cracks. I could see the window of the door. And we just sat there waiting.
Did you keep your eyes on the door?
I did.
And can you explain to the jury why that was?
While I was sitting there, my students complied with everything that I told them. They were very quiet. I did have some students crying.
I said I slept.
Just another heartbreaking testimony is there. She's saying she thought she was going to die that day. She said she felt like a sitting duck. She had her students crying around there today, and Erin Robin wasn't the only teacher that took to the stand today as well. We also saw another teacher, this one by the name of Miss Avila. She was in the classroom with her 4th graders. They went inside after they heard some shots, and she was actually a teacher who was shot by the shooter there at Robb Elementary and fell to the ground. We'll go ahead and play her experience for you as well.
And the door shut. I turned off the lights, and I told the kids go. They already knew, when the lights are off, we lock our door. We know our next step is out of sight, stay down, stay quiet. So that's what I told them, to stay down, stay quiet. And I started directing them. But as soon as we started moving, we heard shots. We heard loud shots in the hallway.
What were your students' reaction upon hearing these shots?
That some of them started crying. They started moving faster towards the corner, getting under the counter. They knew that it was, a real thing, that this time it was not a drill, that it was something real, because they could hear the shots being fired.
Now, what were you doing as the kids are getting down and hiding? What were you doing?
I was directing them, to making sure that everyone was safe and out of sight, was down, and I saw that some kids had gone further down the classroom by the whiteboard, and they were getting too close to the window. So I stood up and was directing them to come closer, to the corner, to the west side, closer to me, where I could see everyone and where everyone was. And as I stood there and I was waving them over, that's when I felt. Well, we were hearing shots, and I felt a shot on my left side.
So you were shot at this point?
At this point, yes.
At the moment that you're standing up directing the kids to get closer to you. Is that correct?
Yes.
So did you realize you were shot? I mean, what did you feel?
Yes, because I felt the pain, I felt the burning pain, and I know I yelled, "Oh no, I'm shot," and I fell to the floor. So yes, I knew I was shot, and I put my hand on my side, and I saw blood. When I took my hand away, I saw blood, so I knew that I had been shot.
Once you fell to the floor, what happened next?
I fell to the floor, and we kept hearing the shots. They were just going like that, just one after the other, and it would stop, and then it would go.
And And the teacher, Miss Avila, just, reliving those moments. You can see her pounding on the desk there, and, in rapidity, just showing just how many bullets are being fired at this point in the other classrooms. She goes on to describe after this, after she'd been fought and she falls to the ground, that she reaches for her phone and she starts texting the counselors, the principal, saying, I've been shot, I've been shot, and with my kids, we're in lockdown. And she eventually, stops receiving text as this shooter moves through the school. So just, a terrifying experience as some of these teachers took to the stand, as well as hearing from Joe Vasquez as well. But we're going to have more for that coming up right after the break. We're also going to have our very own Jenna King joining us as well. Like I said, she's been following along with this since these trials started. She did a deep dive into some of these interviews today, as well as an interview with Adrian Gonzalez the day after that shooting as well. She's going to break that down for us. We'll have that for you coming up right after the break. All right, thank you for joining us back here in for Austin Now. As I promised, bringing in Jenna King now. Jenna, you kind of been following along with these trials. They, started last week, and it seems like every day there's some sort of new development, some sort of new person that's taking to the stand. I mean, today was no different, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Each day emotional, day after day, and yeah, like you said, today was no different. Yeah, you played the clip. Just, I mean, you're not really shocked to see it after day of like all this emotional, testimony. It seems like earlier, the start of this trial, we had, more officers kind of taking testimony. Now it seems like it's moved to teachers and people that, were in these rooms, in these classrooms as this all unfolded. So, as you can imagine, really, really, really dark, sad stuff.
Yeah, and both of us were talking a testimony that really took, both of us, kind of by surprise was Joe Vasquez and him going in there after his own daughter. I mean, I know he said, what was the clip, him saying, why did you go in there? And, you were kind of talking to me about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, just kind of a crazy, interesting story for people, who don't quite know. He works as a deputy with Zavala County, so not even in his county. And he's off duty. He said he was going to the gym and he's in his workout gear, and I think he said he just finished running and totally not obviously prepared for a situation like this. But he hears about it from some coworkers and stops what he's doing and he rushes over there. He said he got there as quick as he can. They said, "Were you speeding?" He said, "Of course." And his daughter, a 7th grader there, which is just adds to the heightened sense of needing to be there. But just, one of the heroes that really kind of just stepped up and, joined in this whole really scary situation to walk into. Yeah, he kind of got there. He didn't really know, what he had a gun with him. He said he kind of just was, asking, where's the shooter, walking around.
Yeah, they were kind of, I know in the trial they asked him, he got briefed very quickly when he showed up there, and then he decided to take it in his own hands, right?
Yeah, and he fired multiple shots himself in the hallway, and he said he was just kind of waiting for instructions, and a lot of the questions were just kind of like, were you scared to walk into the situation? And
he was very upfront about it. He said, I thought I was going to die, you know what I mean? And it's, it's really interesting to see something that raw in that moment. People, expressing their feelings when they're faced with that sort of, danger.
Yeah, it very, very, and he ended up being reunited with the daughter later on, I think at a reunification center.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, he didn't run away. He wanted to run toward all of this, and so it really just speaks to the type of person he is. And definitely emotional. He got emotional when he was talking about what was going through his mind with his daughter, stuff like that.
And I showed a few clips of the teachers talking as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously very emotional moments with them as well. Was there anything that you kind of noticed in their testimonies today? Anything that kind of stuck out with you that really hit home for you?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it, but that 4th grade teacher, Elsa Avila, she was talking about just how it was like her, it was like a happy day of like awards in the morning.
Yeah, I think they were doing their science awards. She was taking pictures of that.
She said they were taking pictures of like her science awards, and they were trying to do some sort of science experiment with the shoe, and she was having so much fun with the kids, and everyone was laughing and joking, and just how quickly that moment went from happiness to just all of this tragedy and destruction. And so she basically, a student in her class noticed something was off, and the student heard, she said the line leader of the class heard students screaming and running into classes and said, "Hey, Miss Avila, what's going on? What's going on?" And she was like, she said like, "Oh, I'm sure it's fine. Like, her teacher will take care of that." And then it continued, and so she goes to kind of check in the hallway, and she sees people screaming, "Get in the class! Get in the class!" And so that's the moment she said, "Okay, we're going into the lockdown." That's kind of how they're trained: lights off, shut the door, lock it. No one else can go in. Just you cannot open the door to anyone except law enforcement. And in that moment, it's when she gets shot. She just notices, she
didn't even realize it at first.
She didn't even realize. I think she probably had so much adrenaline and just trying to keep track of the class. But just she goes down, and she just you mentioned it briefly, but just kind of describes her. You can imagine she's trying to watch this whole class and keep everyone calm, and she's just been shot. And how do you kind of navigate that situation and asking for help? And really just a powerful testimony from her.
Yeah, and the thing I noticed with both of these teachers that took to the stand today as well, when they asked, about did anything, go right? Was there anything that these kids did? And that's what they go back to. They said these kids, they did so well. They said, and you can imagine how traumatic of an experience this is, hearing these loud booms in school. I remember one of I think it was for Aaron Robin, they heard some of the pops, and they said, a young kid came up to me, she said, "Was that gunshots?" And she didn't know. She said, "I don't know. I can't tell you." And that's the one thing they kept on saying is these kids did so good.
Yeah,
right?
Avila said, as she's looking on the phone, calling on her, texting other people on her phone, that the kids stepped in and were like, trying to comfort her. And, "Are you okay, Miss Avila? We love you. We love you. You're going to be okay." So 4th graders, you know what I mean, to go through something like that and just to be there for her, it was just really really emotional for sure.
Yeah, and then I mean going on to Officer Adrian Gonzalez. I kind of talked about this before we went to the break. We were kind of sitting at our desk a little bit earlier, and they were still. I mean, this trials today were going on probably longer than 6 hours. Probably today they were in session today, and they eventually ended up playing a video of an interview of Adrian Gonzalez, the officer that's standing on trial right now, just the day after all of this happened at Robb Elementary, and it was an interview with the Texas Rangers, correct?
Yeah, so they played an interview between Gonzalez and the Texas Ranger the day after all of this went down, and so very interesting because you kind of get a blurb into what you kind of hear about it from Gonzalez's perspective, and we also they confirmed that we now know it took about over 70 minutes for them to breach the door to get in, and they asked Gonzalez how long he thought he'd been outside, and he said 20 to 30 minutes. So yeah, just very, very interesting. Also, he mentioned there were other officers with him. I don't think we've been focusing on the other officers.
Over 300 that eventually arrived on the scene.
And so yeah, the defense I think is making it seem like he had the other officers had a better view, and that Gonzalez didn't necessarily see the shooter. And so there's just a lot to unpack, and still a lot for us to cover with all of this. But yeah, and so one of the officers Gonzalez was got shot, and so they retreated. And I guess from that point on, Gonzalez was helping check on the officer, because I guess his wife, I just learned this recently, had been shot. So Gonzalez was also helping that. And so they just more insight that we get into this interview that we didn't necessarily know before. Absolutely. Gotcha. Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack here, and yeah, each day it's just heartbreaking testimony day after day.
And before we let you go, Jenna, I talked a little bit about that outburst as well from the family member. We were talking, that was probably maybe one of the more emotional, moments in that happened right there. Can you tell us anything about that? Anything that we know about this woman, or anything that kind of led up to it in those moments?
Yeah, just that it was after that testimony that we were talking about from Vasquez, and so you can imagine, we were kind of talking about how maybe that family member was maybe holding it in and kind of waited till that testimony was done to then have that moment, and yeah, the whole fatal funnel thing, and I think just feeling that that family member of a teacher who died, you can imagine what they're probably going through. But yeah, the judge making it very clear that she won't be allowed back in the courtroom again, and
even threatening a mistrial at one point too, saying we can't, this kind of behavior can't be allowed in the courtroom while these proceedings are going on.
Yeah, and you can really just hear the emotion in her voice, and how it's just it is quite an outburst, and yeah, just a lot of questions moving forward, because there are a lot of family members and and other staff members who have been in this courtroom every day, and so you can imagine a lot of them are really holding a lot in, feeling similar.
Yeah, and with all this evidence going on, I'm assuming this trial is going to be going on for the foreseeable future as well, so I'm sure you'll be bringing us more coverage here again in the future. But Jenny will be in the 9 o'clock tonight,
yes.
Correct? All right, so right after this show ends, if you want to get more of a polished view, I guess, of Jenna's story telling, then that's going to be kind of right o'clock at 9, so you can catch Jenna King right over there. Before we let you go for the ad break, go ahead and just show you a scene over right here that's happening in East Austin as well. This is an abandoned home fire that APD is responding to on Shady Lane and Airport Road over there. Happened just about 7:30 over there. We have our crews out there that have been monitoring it for the past hour or so. We'll have more updates for you coming up when we come back. Welcome back into the Fox 7 newsroom. Right before we went to the break, I know we were talking about an abandoned fire over there as well that's happening in East Austin. We'll go ahead and just bring you the scene here once again as well. This is off Shady Lane near Airport Boulevard. Austin Fire responding to an abandoned home fire over there. Like we said, that happened about 7:30 there. You can see, seems like the scene is calming down just a little bit over there. We do see some fire trucks along with EMS as well, but it seems like that fire has been put out now. We do know that it was an abandoned home fire that we were fighting. We do have some of the pictures from Austin Fire that definitely look worth a look as well. This was the scene, like we said, they posted these about 7:50. So this was that abandoned home over there. You can see it basically all taken up in flames over there. You can see, obviously, signs of this thing not having any inhabitants, at least at the time. A lot of graffiti, a lot of just signs of abandonment over there. There was a decent amount of crews over there. We don't know how long exactly it took them to get this fire under control. But like we said, does seem like it is on its final legs over there right now. But moving on now, we will stay here in Austin and switching over to the law enforcement side of things. Some very sad processions today for 2 law enforcement officers who were killed in the line of duty as well. We were talking about one of them last night, Aaron Armstrong. He was Caldwell County deputy who was killed while he was working as an off-duty security officer at a nightclub here in North Austin. That procession today taking place as they took him to his resting place in Benton, Texas. But this was Aaron Armstrong. He was the off-duty Caldwell County Constable deputy who was shot and killed. This was the scene over here at Shoreline Church. This happened here just about 11 a.m. this morning is when that service started over there. You can see that man and that woman right there are actually Aaron Armstrong's brother and sister-in-law. They're being escorted to the front as these proceedings were happening, as they remembered the life of the fallen constable deputy. And you may remember when we were talking about him last night, he was killed on the night of January 4th. He was working as an off-duty security officer at Club Rodeo. He was going to escort a man who had been kicked out by the name of Thomas Vencez. Eventually, they started getting into verbal altercations. And at one point, Armstrong did try to arrest Vencez. That's when Vencez revealed a firearm and did end up fatally shooting Officer Armstrong. You can see now they did have quite the procession for him there today. A lot of his family, and then agencies from all across the state. We saw sheriff's departments, local police organizations there as well, all showing out to support him. And it was very emotional at certain points. You can see right here him being saluted as they bring his coffin into one of the vehicles, which would eventually take him to his resting place. In that procession went through all different parts. It started off there over there in North Austin, and eventually did make its way over to Belton, Texas. They made part of their way through Round Rock as well, so that happened on I-35 as they were moving over there. You can see in the background just how many officers are here in attendance and how many people showed up to support Officer Caldwell, who obviously meant so much to so many. And we actually do have some sound, as I talked about. We saw his brother and his sister-in-law there, and they gave some very emotional testimonies of him, and they shared what other people thought about him in his life as well. We just had Jenna King in there, and when this had all happened, she talked to one of his friends who knew him well. And Aaron Armstrong, he didn't have a wife or children, so he dedicated a lot of his time into his job and his community, and was very highly thought of by the community as well. So we do have some of that sound here for you. This is Tiffany. This is his sister-in-law, who did talk today at the funeral proceedings that were taking place.
And who's come. Thank you for all of y'all who traveled far. Thank you for the Brotherhood for just showing us what that word really means. It has been uplifting, amazing, overwhelming. But thank y'all for coming to help us celebrate Aaron's life. My speech is not original. I went through and I pulled a lot of what people were saying about Aaron, and it was eye-opening. So Aaron lived and ultimately gave his life protecting others. That was who he was from the very beginning. His cousin remembers being picked on at church as a little girl. Aaron stepped up and without a second thought went to defend her. That protective spirit stayed with him his entire life. For those of us in the Blue family, Aaron wasn't just a coworker, he was a brother. He was a good man and a true mentor. One friend said it best: he taught me lessons through training, through experience, and through the way he lived. And he always looked out for me, defended me, and treated everyone with respect and kindness. Another post that someone had put said that Aaron gave freely of himself. He let friends' kids wrestle and roughhouse with them, taught them gun safety, shared his love of guitars and music. He offered his time, his knowledge, and anything else that he had to people he cared about. He was the one you could count on, no matter the ask. To many, he was the third shift king, steady, energetic, and always keeping others safe. He loved the Longhorn football and even rooted for the Cowboys, and found joy in simple things such as a good Frito pie, adding another guitar to his collection, or taking his kayaks out on the lake. Aaron had a huge heart, and yes, he was stubborn as a mule. His grandmother lovingly called him his little jackass, and he wore that title well. He was known for his pranks, picking up kids by their feet, Nerf battles, skipping rocks at the lake, and offering quiet encouragement when someone needed it the most. He touched people in big ways and small, and the stories shared over these past days just show how deeply he was loved. As so many of his law enforcement brothers and sisters have written, Godspeed, Aaron Armstrong. We have the watch from here.
You see, obviously, a very emotional moment from his sister-in-law, Tiffany, right there. Her getting a little, broken up there at the end, saying that we have the watch from here. But it just goes to show how many lives that, Constable, or Deputy Constable Armstrong had on so many people. Her reading off those social media posts on, people who just came across him in their daily lives, and just the impact that he had on them, and just how much he cared for that community and cared for the people in that community as well. And then we also have his brother right here as well, who they describes how they come from a big law enforcement family, that he himself is involved in law enforcement, that their father was involved in law enforcement, that it was something that was just kind of in their blood. And even at this point, he's still in shock, still having trouble with the fact that accepting that his brother is now gone.
Well, I definitely can't top that. My wife, I guess I married pretty good. Aaron and I, growing up in Odessa, we were a police officer's family, and everything that goes with that. My father would go out to work to shift and come back, and he'd tell us what he would do. And sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad. We grew up with that, and so I was kind of prepared early on for that kind of lifestyle. I loved my brother. He affectionately called me Bubba or Bub when he wanted to shorten it. We didn't talk too much, or we talked often, but we didn't see each other because we worked opposite shifts. He usually worked at night, I worked during the day, and he would call me when he could, and we would talk guns, fishing, which I have no interest in doing, so I'm glad he loved his fishing. It was something that he could sit there and relieve stress, and I listened to him. I still can't believe my brother's gone. I'm still in denial. Hopefully in the coming days it will sink in. His friends have been constantly coming up to me and telling how much Aaron has meant to them, what he's given, and how he's helped people. He was a giver. As my wife said in the speech, he gave of himself freely.
And, you can see that was kind of the common theme throughout this entire funeral process, throughout these memorial services, that he was just a giver, known as a person who would, kind of give you the shirt off his back there. And that was the common theme. He just touched so many people in so many different ways. So he'll obviously be very remembered within the Caldwell County community over there and by the people that knew him. But, unfortunately, that wasn't the only procession, the only remembrance that happened today for a fallen law enforcement officer. You may remember it was just back, just here recently that in Copper's Cove, one of their officers was killed over there in the line of duty in an officer-involved shooting, and that was him right here. This was Elijah Garrettson, who was killed on January 10th. He was, part of a procession today by the community who worked to remember the young officer who was a part of that community over there that went from Temple through Copper's Cove city limits. They came in from Highway 9 over there, and you can see some of those officers, some military service members, and in uniform as well. That is close to clean over there as well, where there's a big military presence, and it's still kind of unclear at this point what exactly may have happened. The details are still very vague. That shooting happened, like we said, on January 10th and involved shooting at the intersection of Great Hills Drive and Lost Trail. The details and how it all played out aren't exactly clear. We just know that after the shooting, the suspect was tracked to a different location where they ultimately did take their lives with that gun. You can see that the coroner's car right there with the body of Officer Garrettson inside as they move to the funeral home over there, and obviously a big turnout from the community as well. Copper's Cove, a smaller community over there, so obviously very tight-knit as well. So sad to see so many proceedings here in one day for fallen law enforcement officers, but that investigation has now been taken into the hands of the Texas Rangers, as is the usual proceedings for when that happens, when an officer is killed in the line of the duty. We're going to go ahead and head to a break here for you real quick. Before we let you go ahead. This is Minneapolis over there, as those ICE protests continue to stretch into multiple days. Over 2,000 DHS officers have entered into the city over there with Kristi Noem, keeping up with their promise that there will be more to come as well. We'll have more on that and a look for you when we come back right after the break. right, welcome back into Austin now. Glad to have you joining us here again. We'll go right back to that live look over there in Minneapolis. Ongoing protests. Tension still very, very high over there as ICE continues to carry out what they call one of their largest operations in history. Actually, what they say the largest operation in DHS's history over there. We don't have the audio for you, but as you can tell, these people not screaming nice things by the look of it as well. They're outside what appears to be some sort of ICE presence over there. A large crowd over there, and that's what we've seen over these last few days, especially as these crowds out in the streets, making it very clear they are opposed to ICE activity over there, especially after the killing of Renee Good as well. So we'll continue to bring you live looks for that as that continues to unfold throughout the night. But we're going to go back to something a little bit more local here in Austin, as well as the rest of Texas as well. There's some new proposals for massive hikes for hemp retailers as part of new laws here in the state, some of which retailers are saying could potentially put them out of business if they are carried out. Go ahead and just show you. This is one of our articles that we have online, kind of just giving a breakdown of what this could mean for the future of the hemp industry here in Texas. Right now, you might remember just a few months ago, Governor Abbott, he instructed, that there needs to be some sort of revamp to, for state health officials to create new rules for the hemp industry. We've already seen bans on, the THC vapes, which are now illegal to sell here within the state. Now, some of these health officials seem to want to go a little bit at the hemp industry here in Texas. They have released a new proposal just at the very end of December, some of which is, proposing some pretty big changes to what people might be able to afford in order to sell hemp. We'll kind of go through it real quick. That registration fee for retail hemp sellers would jump to $20,000 annually per location. You want to know what it was before this new proposal? It was $250. So people are saying this is a 10,000% increase for a retailer who's usually used to paying $250 a year. Now they're going to have to go up to potentially $20,000 per location, and that's not just a one-time deal. That is annually. And for those hemp manufacturers, that would climb to $25,000 annually, and those delinquency fees would trigger a $1,000 penalty. That's up from the previous $100 that it was originally set at. And beyond just, the prices, which have obviously, these fees, which are obviously, very upsetting for a lot of these retailers as well, the health officials are wanting to introduce some new, what they're calling precautions in order to potentially keep hemp from getting into the hands of children. They're going to introduce stricter definitions for total THC and require new testing so that it can ensure that it does not exceed the legal limit of 0.3% in THC. They also want to implement new age verification requirements and prohibit anyone with hemp-related license revocation the last 5 years from applying. And there was an opportunity for public input here recently, just earlier on last week, where they did open up the public for comments, and where they were allowing people to come forward and see what they thought about this proposal, because that's what it is right now, just a proposal. This is not set in stone, but we do have some reactions from people who took to the stand and were obviously very upset at what this could potentially mean for the hemp industry here in Texas.
Tell the truth, I had a customer come in the other day at one of my stores that I own. They told me, I miss supporting my 17-year-old local drug dealer. Those days are coming back if all these things are implemented. Violence with teenagers is going to go on the rise. Growing up, my best friend was shot in the back of the head over $100 of cannabis. So it's going to go black market. It's not going to go away. So I know you're going to establish whatever rules you want, but the more rules you establish, it's just going to go black market. More violence is going to happen. And as a veteran, I'm tired of violence, but it is what it is. I just want y'all to be aware. The more things you ban, it doesn't stop people. As soon as the vape ban went through, the 17-year-olds were on Instagram. I can pull them up, and they're selling the illegal vapes from California. So robberies are going to go up, drug dealing is going to go up, and that's my stance. I don't think that the regulations are going to do anything to stop minors from getting it, but I do think it's going to reduce drug dealing and violence. And y'all can do whatever you're going to do. I don't really care. If the fee goes to $20,000, I'll just pay it. But the more you ban, the more violence is going to come, from my opinion. So, thank you.
And he did bring to point, a question that we had here in the newsroom when we were kind of talking about this is, if potentially if you raise, these fees up to that $20,000 range and you see a lot of these local retailers potentially start to go out of business, then what does that mean for the future of, how people are going to get their hands on THC? Is that going to open up potentially an even bigger black market for that, where this man points out that once they banned those THC vapes, he started seeing them pop up all over Instagram by teenagers who are taking it into their own hands, getting them from other states like California, then bringing them here to Texas to resell. So he's saying that, could potentially happen all over here, again, for the entire THC industry if they were to implement something like that. So definitely, an issue that we're going to be keeping an eye on here as this progresses further and as that legislation, eventually has to be voted on as well. But we're going to go ahead and go to a quick break real quick. When we come back, we'll have the latest on those protests here in Minneapolis in terms of what's going on over there, as well as some of the latest with what is going on with Iran and President Trump's plans for the future of the Middle East over there. All right, welcome back into the Fox 7 newsroom. We're going to go right back to another live look over there. Active protests in Minneapolis. This has been going on for the last several days. Seems like tensions are getting higher and higher over there every day since the killing of Renee Good by an ICE agent over there just last week. As I mentioned before, over 2,000 DHS agents currently in the city right now as the agency is carrying out what they call one of their largest crackdowns in history. You can see we got one of the crews out there. You can see a pretty decently sized crowd over there. It's unclear what they're standing in front of right now, but they have been out there for a little while now, kind of shouting at some of these officers out there. It's unclear if maybe this is a federal facility over there or what they might be standing in front of as well. So we'll be going back to that here whenever we do have a chance. But obviously, the activity in Minneapolis, a very big point of attention. But moving, your eyes to the Middle East and Iran, this has also been a very big point of, of worry for a lot of people here in the U.S. as people are, with President Trump mentioning that he might, consider military action. That, with all of these protests going on and activists currently saying that as of today that there's potentially over 2,000 deaths that have taken place since these protests began over 2 weeks ago, President Trump has repeatedly warned that if this, continues to escalate, that he will have to, consider military action over there. And he actually did talk to reporters a little bit today at Joint Base Edwards as well. They're asking him some questions about Iran and what the U.S. is, potentially considering over there. This question that the reporter is about to ask is, in terms of Iran, they told the U.S. that if they were to carry out these strikes, how would Iran retaliate? And Iran said, that they would, hit the U.S. back. This is what Trump had to say in response to that over there.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen.
Intel Iran says that it will retaliate in the instance of U.S. strikes against U.S. assets in the Middle East. What do you say to U.S. service members about why it is worth the risk to intervene in Iran?
Yeah, Iran said that the last time I blew them up with the nuclear capability, which they don't have any longer. So Iran said that the last time. They better behave.
You can see, President Trump telling Iran that they better behave, and that's, a point that, these reporters keep on asking to him is if, what do you think Iran thinks of these threats? And he says, hey, we already have a track record of, taking action against the country, and he, refers back to Operation Midnight, in which the U.S. carried out multiple strikes across nuclear facilities across the country of Iran, and, dealt seemingly a very heavy blow over there to their nuclear capabilities as well. And as I was mentioning, Trump is continuing to crack down on this as well. He just announced that recently that they have ceased all negotiations, ceased communication with Iran right now, as they continue to consider how they are wanting to tackle this as well. This comes as Trump has announced 25% tariffs on anybody who does business with them. This post coming just yesterday as well, effective immediately. Any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all business being done with the United States of America. This order is final and conclusive. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So he doesn't want to send just a message to Iran, but to the rest of the world, that if you continue to do business, with the Iranian regime, that you will be one of the ones to suffer some of the consequences for that. So a lot to be keeping our eyes on, as we covered a lot today, all the stuff going on in Minneapolis, Uvalde, everything happening with the country of Iran as well. All stuff that is definitely going to be very important to be keeping your eyes on. But that's going to do it for us here tonight. I am done with you here. You had me on Monday, you had me on Tuesday. Alec Nolan will be back for you tomorrow. Have a good rest of your evening.